Hello, welcome back to another video. I am outside again this morning. It's another beautiful spring day here on Crete. The sun is shining finally. We've actually been having an unusually cold and wet spring up until about a week ago. Just raining every day. And then it went abruptly from winter to summer. So all the flowers are blooming and everything is very lush and green. And it's very lovely. I wanted to say thanks for all the positive comments and everything on my last couple of videos about the weight gain and everything. Feels very, very nice, very touching to know that after all this time, there's still, some of you are still interested in listening to me ramble on about stuff. So thanks. Thank you for sticking with me. Today I thought I would chat a little bit about how I got into raw foods, because I don't think I've ever actually made a video specifically about that. And I don't know, maybe it'll be interesting to somebody, maybe it'll be I don't know if it's really the most inspirational story or anything, but well, I'll just tell it and let you make up your own mind, I guess. Let's see. So, how did I get into raw foods? I actually, it's kind of interesting. I was one of those people who kind of went vegan and got into raw vegan like pretty much the same time. There was like a period of like a month or two in between going vegan and then going raw vegan, but it was like pretty close. It was pretty close. So what's the story? The story is that I was raised vegetarian. So I grew up like my whole life. I never ate meat. The only thing was like once a week or so, my dad would cook seafood or fish, because apparently that we figured that was like vegetarian enough or something. I don't know. Don't ask me. Apparently, just yeah. Anyway, that's what it was. So yeah, like a pretty in the scheme of things, like fairly healthy vegetarian diet growing up. I went to university. I moved across the country. For those of you who don't know, I grew up on the west coast of Canada, in British Columbia, and I decided to go to university to study, to go to music school, actually, in Montreal, which is on the east coast of Canada. So I went there at the age of 17. I moved there by myself, and the other part of the story that I need to touch on before going further is that I've struggled with an eating disorder for most of my adult life. The eating disorder is something that started long before I ever went vegan. I actually started like when I was 13 years old, first year of high school. And that's something that I've struggled on and off with for the past 20 years of my life. And so when I was ready to go to university at the age of 17, at that time I had a fairly good handle on my eating disorder. I was pretty focused on my music, and I was at a pretty healthy place, mentally and physically. And so I think me and my parents and everything felt pretty good about me going off on this adventure to move across the country and go to university. And it was great. It was really great. For the first 2 years, I did really well. I had such a great time, and things went really well for me. in the start of my third year, that's when things started to kind of take a turn for the worse. At this time, I was renting a room and living with this older guy who was actually a raw food chef at Montreal's biggest and most famous raw food restaurant. And he was always, bringing home these recipe idea, making these, experimenting with these different things at home, and he would offer them to me to try and stuff, like these different raw crackers and stuff. It was like gourmet raw, right? And so I was like, oh, this is cool. This is so cool. You can make all these things without like cooking and stuff, and make it to taste like the real thing and stuff. Oh yeah, and he had some. He wasn't actually raw or even vegan himself. I think he was vegetarian like me. But he had a bunch of books at his place about raw foods and like why they're so great and everything. And so I was like checking them out and stuff. Whenever, just kind of out of curiosity, just seeing what they had to say and being like, oh, this is cool. Seems like this is a really, really healthy thing to do. And then coincidentally around this same time, the beginning of my third year, I started struggling again really big time with my eating disorder. Honestly, it's hard to know exactly what to attribute this to, but regardless, it is what it is. I started struggling again after a long period of time of doing really well. I started going downhill and losing weight and being really insecure in my body and my body image, feeling like I was like I needed to lose weight and get cleaner and lighter and it's hard to explain anorexia to somebody who's never experienced it, but a lot of it is it doesn't really make any sense to somebody who's just looking at it from the outside. But that's what it was. And so I was having all this stuff coming up about like I need to feel lighter and like less. And I was just slowly, not really even consciously, just like eating less and less and trying to see how little I could eat and also exercising more, going for long walks up the mountain in the middle of Montreal, and just bad times. And then I realized like, oh, okay, this raw food stuff that they're talking about in these books, this is only gonna help to make me feel lighter and better, and this is just gonna help with everything. So I started just playing around with eating more and more raw foods, like they were talking about in these books, and doing like juices and detox and all this stuff, and so unfortunately at this initial period in time, my interest in raw foods was very unhealthy and motivated by a really like it was really unhealthy motivation to like restrict and get like lose weight and feel lighter and all this stuff, clean my my system out, and which didn't need cleaning out anyway, but whatever. So yeah, that was that. And by the time it was time for me to go back home for Christmas vacation, pardon me, I was like dangerously underweight, and my parents were so concerned that my mom took me to our family doctor the very next day, and she was like, you have to go to the hospital. You have to go to the inpatient eating disorder facility at the hospital in Vancouver. And I was like, no, no, I can't do that. I started panicking, and my mom kind of started panicking too, and she's like, she just pleaded with our doctor, and finally managed to convince her that to let me not go to the hospital as long as I agreed to eat whatever my mom gave me to eat. So I agreed, and but that meant that I had to basically surrender complete control over my food and just eat. My mom was completely in charge of feeding me, and feeding me a lot of food, a lot of high calorie food, so that I would start gaining weight again and heal. Because I was like very dangerously skinny. And so that's what we did. That was my Christmas break, and I ended up having to miss the first couple weeks of my second semester to stay back and until I was like had gained enough that I could go back to school. And my mom ended up having to fly out with me because I was still like in a very dangerous physically place. So that she ended up having to fly out with me so that she could continue supporting me to eat and eat properly to gain weight. And at this time, because, neither of us knew, my mom was doing the best she could, but giving me to eat a lot of high fat and high fat foods that were very, very taxing on my body. And so this was at the time, because we're still vegetarian, lots of dairy, lots of cheese and eggs, some salmon, and lots of like vegetarian mock meats and oils and stuff like that. And of course a lot of starches and, beans and grains and stuff too. So went back to Montreal, continued my school, continued eating this way, with the support of my mom. And after a bit of doing this, yes, I was gaining weight, but I was not well. I was not feeling well. And I started to develop really, really bad, really painful gastrointestinal reflux, GERD, acid reflux it's called. And that's basically where the the bottom part of the esophagus, it doesn't, normally it closes to prevent food in the stomach from coming back up, but then with GERD that stops working, so the food in your stomach starts coming back up, and you experience this burning or regurgitating sensation in your up here and in here in your chest, and it's like burping, painful acidic burping, is the best way to describe it. And it's for me it was sometimes so bad that it just took me out. I couldn't even do anything. I couldn't do my focus on school. I couldn't do anything. So it was really becoming a problem. And so my mom was doing her best to try and figure it out and tweak certain things. We stopped eating adding spices, and stopped doing like garlic and onions and stuff, but nothing seemed to be really making it go away. And so I just continued struggling with it for most of the semester. And shortly before the end of the semester, I was watching a video at home on YouTube about something completely unrelated, and this video pops up on the sidebar, like in the suggested recommended, and it was best speech you'll ever hear. I was like, oh, okay, well, better watch it then. And it was, yeah, it was for those of you who don't know, the best speech you'll ever hear by Gary Yourofsky is like this well-known, very, very convincing speech from this vegan activist about why everyone should go vegan. And he talks about in a lot of vivid detail the realities of what happens in industrial commercial animal agriculture. And I was just like shocked, because I thought growing up, I always believed that being vegetarian, I was like doing the best thing by not eating animals. And this whole dairy and eggs and seafood thing was just completely a blind spot for me, and I just had literally had no idea that this industry was also just as cruel, if not possibly even more cruel, than the meat industry. And I was like, oh shit. I cannot eat this crap. I cannot eat this anymore. I'm sorry. And I told my mom, I got her to watch the video. She watched the video. She's like, yeah, we can't do this. Like, we can't, no, we have to go vegan. But then we're like, oh shit, we've got a fridge full of cheese and eggs and a freezer full of smoked salmon. What the hell? Like, is it better to just throw it out? Or so long story short, we ended up finishing all that. And then after that took like 2 or 3 weeks. Finally then we're like, okay. So my mom and I both went vegan at the same time. After watching Gary Yourofsky, the best speech you'll ever hear, and realizing what hypocrites we were for continuing to eat dairy and eggs. And that basically, when we actually went vegan, was right before the end of my 3rd year. So right before the end of the semester. And so I finished the semester, and then we went back home to Vancouver, to the West Coast, continued being vegan, and my acid reflux was like even worse, because my mom was like, okay, when we went vegan, my mom was like, oh shoot, like all this dairy and stuff that I was giving you to like try and gain weight, because I was still underweight. Even by this time, I was still trying to needed to gain weight. She was like, okay, how are you gonna gain weight now that we're not doing that we're vegan? It's like, how are we gonna do it? So she was like researching and like trying to, she started making salads for me that were like just full of all these nuts and seeds, and just like lots of olive oil and coconut oil and just all this fat, so much fat. Looking back on it, it's crazy. And so my acid reflux, because one of the primary things that causes acid reflux, I know now, is high fat diet. So it makes, yeah. So yeah, it was just getting worse and worse, and eventually I just got to a point where I was like, I started thinking again. Actually, I started thinking again back when I lived with this raw food chef guy. I was like, I remember those raw food books that I was reading. Those, I feel like there's got to be something to that. Like I was thinking about them and just remembering. And so I went back to the internet. I went back and started trying to do my own research. And after after a while, that just led me to, like, I just started researching like raw vegan diet, and finally ended up finding Dr. Doug Graham and the 80-10-10 diet, and learning all about the high carb, low fat raw vegan approach, because everything that I had seen up until that point was like all the raw vegan stuff was talking about like how great oil is and like all this nuts and seeds, and talking about like the more gourmet type of raw, which I was, I could tell it wasn't the answer. And so when I found Doug Graham and this low fat approach, and then I started, after I found him, I started finding more people who were doing it and talking about it. I immediately became intrigued and was like, oh, this makes complete sense, because he was talking about fat and how it inhibits the insulin and everything, and I was like, okay, this makes sense. This is why I'm having so many problems with my digestion and my acid reflux. And so I decided, like, okay, I'm gonna try this. And so the next day I went completely raw vegan, high carb, 80-10-10, just doing exactly what Doug said to do, eating fruit throughout the day. And oh my God, even just after one day, it was like night and day difference. I felt so good. I felt like a kid again, and I was just like bouncing off the walls. I had so much energy. I was just like going outside and just like running around, and like, yeah, I literally just felt like I was 5 years old again. And it was awesome. And initially, my mom was also, because I was still trying to gain weight. Like, initially, my mom was concerned about it, because she's like, how are you going to get enough calories? But then once I like showed it to her and explained it to her and stuff, she got on board too, and helped me figure out a way to make it work, so that I was able to get enough calories. And realized that by focusing more on the sweet fruits was much more effective way to ensure that I was getting enough. So that's what we did, and yeah, ever since then I have not remained 100% raw for the last 13 years, but ever since then, for the last 13 years, I have either been 100% raw or predominantly raw with small amounts of cooked food. But, the interesting thing is, like, even when I go back to experimenting with small amounts of cooked food in my diet, I always seem to end up coming back to raw. I always seem to end up coming back to, like, 100% raw. And that's how I eat now, and how I feel like I generally most enjoy eating most of the time, is 100% raw. And so that's the story of how I got into it, and how it's been such a pillar of my life for the last 13 years. I don't know if I covered everything, but I think that's the important parts of the story. So, yeah, hopefully that was somewhat interesting. This is getting to be a crazy long video, so I'm going to shut up now and stop rambling. But yeah, if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and feel free to leave a comment, and I will see you again, hopefully very soon. Okay, bye.